Hi guys. Hi guys. Hello. I hope the audio is coming fine. I think it is. Thank you for joining the live stream. Today we resume that paper written by Professor Dr. Janaki Bakhle from UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, who is a professor of history there. She's the wife of the famous sociologist. Live stream is black and white, yes. She's the wife of the famous sociologist Nicholas B. Dirks, who has disproved a lot of misconceptions about the caste conversation. And last day, while discussing this 38-page paper, at around 29th page, my internet went off for 15 minutes. So today we are starting from the 26th page so that we can resume and recap a bit by starting from the last sort of the subheading and subchapter we started from, okay? This will be fun. So this will be a pretty big 2-3 paragraph recap, okay? And as those of you who are joining just today's live stream and haven't seen the first, you won't understand any of the context of the paper unless you check out the part 1 of this conversation as well. Do check out that one because you'll understand who she is, why is she writing about this. This paper is just for context. This is from 2010, by the way, okay? So do check that one out and let's see what else she has found out about Savarkar, because I'll say this much, that she has been as fair as possible for after all, she's a leftist Marxist from mainstream academia, and this is from a mainstream publication. This is from Duke University Press, okay, this journal. So she has not remotely been as dismissive of Savarkar as all other mainstream academics are. So we have come across some things that can be interpreted as compliments. Some are direct compliments, like the famous argument that the left in India keeps making about Savarkar, which is why did he apologize? She points out that first of all he apologized after 10 years, and then if he really was a coward, if he really wanted to run away from this life, why would he come out and write an even more seditious book called Essentials of Hindutva, which is basically reviewed in this entire paper, and that too in English? He does that deliberately so that the English-speaking audience of the country and the British themselves can read that book and see this is my views. I don't care anymore. So there's no argument of Savarkar being a coward here. So based on that context, let's start from what kind of history does nationalism need, okay? This will be fun because this basically discusses what kind of history do we need to even bother about, or especially in our context, in today's context, what kind of history should be taught in schools. We will interpret this part as a continuation of that conversation that we are always having in the non-left of the country. It's a camera alert, yes. Great to catch you live after watching several days. Oh, thanks Akash. Yeah, I'm Shastri. Yeah, camera is all right. The black and white is deliberate. Nina Jai Shri Ram, long time no see, because I was coming live at weird times. Yatish, hi Abhay, namaskar. Okay, let's start. So Rajwade, those of you who don't know who Rajwade is, do check out the previous live stream. He's also a historian. Rajwade's lasting contribution, according to Wakankar, Rajwade was basically one of the heroes of academic heroes of Savarkar himself. Okay, Rajwade's lasting contribution, according to Wakankar, who is a researcher who was writing about Rajwade. Rajwade's lasting contribution, according to Wakankar, was the quote-unquote attempt to install history itself at the heart of language, to try to prove that a language and a history are conterminous. During the 19th century, the historical relationship between Maratha as a caste name, Marathi, the language, Brahman, a caste name, and Maharashtrian, which is the anglicized term for regional inhabitants who spoke Marathi and could belong to any number of castes, was increasingly conflated. Savarkar would both use and extend such a conflation. While he was clearly comfortable with the proposition that Marathi nationalist history began with the compact between Guru Ramdas and Shivaji, his own conception of Indian history stretched far beyond the bounds that Rajwade imposed on it, by placing around it regional scare quotes. Savarkar dilutes and expands Rajwade's conception of history through his insistence in Hindutva that a name was a concept and history at the same time. What a beautiful thing to say. In effect, through Savarkar's deliberate delineation of each occurrence of the word, Savarkar dilutes and expands Rajwade's conception of history through his insistence in Hindutva that a name was a concept and history at the same time. In effect, through Savarkar's deliberate delineation of each occurrence of the word Hindu, he makes a new kind of historical argument by repetition and accretion, the mere listing of mythological names sufficing as proof. Savarkar understood that nationalism does not in fact need historical accuracy. In his indifference to all the protocols of historical writing that Rajwade embraced, he seems to suggest that myth provides a more than adequate substitute for history. Savarkar uses a smattering of quotes from early chronicles and contemporaneous historical evidence such as letters in the service of a single point of convergence, which is Shivaji's defeat of Aurangzeb. The first work of Savarkar quotes from the first work Savarkar quotes from is Prithviraj Raso by Chand Bardai. Since Chand Bardai uses the words Hindi and Hind so often as back as the 11th century, Savarkar argues that there can be no doubt on the matter that Hindu was a term used as a definition, as a self-identifying definition. Yet again, Savarkar shows the irrelevance of historical accuracy since Prithviraj Raso dates no earlier than 16th century. From Chand Bardai, Savarkar leaps to Guru Ramdas and quotes numerous lines from a poem that dreams of a world in which the righteous reign and Aurangzeb is defeated by Shivaji. So she's been critical of Savarkar's historical accuracy here. The Hindu poet Bhushan, who challenges Aurangzeb and praises Shivaji, is cited only as Videh Bhushan Granthavali. 3 undetailed citations follow. Chhatra Prakash, with the explanation that it was the text that describes the events of Chhatrasal's reign for which no dates are given and was composed by Lal Kavi, followed by Patha Prakash and then Surya Prakash, absent the names of authors, let alone the dates of publication. And why this was, it will be later justified by a person who used to be the personal doctor of Savarkar, whom this author met. In this section, youthful Shivaji wrote a letter in 1646 apparently, and the source is identified as Rajwade's collection. In the last part of this section, Savarkar uses letters again, but we are given no further information about where to locate them. Dhondo Govind to Bajirao, Bajirao to Brahmendra Swami, Jai Singh, where we are given a detailed date, AD October 26, 1721, but no location, Nana Sahib's letters, and the last letter from Govindrao Kale to Nana Fadnavis in 1793. So basically she's complaining that Savarkar's work would not have passed the muster of a modern academic journal, I guess, because the citations are not enough. Why are there so few specifics? When I asked this question of Savarkar's physician, Arvind Godbole, who attended to him in his last years and is himself the author of a book and several articles on Savarkar, I found him both bemused and matter-of-fact in his response. According to him, Savarkar had an exceptional and photographic memory, and he had read Gurmukhi texts as a student in London when he wrote a history of the Sikh community. Prithviraj Raso was a text he read in the Andamans. Furthermore, Savarkar had been independently mulling over the idea of Hindutva while a student in London and had written part of a territorial poem, Priyakar Hindustan, in which he had already done the conceptual work for Hindutva. In any event, Hindutva was written in prison. Basically, this book, Essentials of Hindutva. Or is there any separate book called Hindutva? I don't know, sorry guys. In any event, Hindutva was written in prison and in secret. He had a plan and he had followed it exactly. The text itself makes clear, however, that there was no need for more evidence or exactitude. Savarkar's shrewd political sense lay in accurately identifying his middle-class audience, one that he could captivate by his mixture of an older poetic modality in English prose and then impress with his seeming grasp of an array of historical sources in several languages. He was not writing for the scholarly elite, many of whom could challenge his Sanskrit knowledge or his translations of texts or even his pretensions to poetic convention, kavya. He was not writing for the Sanskrit Pandits in Pune or Varanasi. This is not because Savarkar does not write for elitists. He was not an elitist himself. He did not write for the elite. Not writing for the Sanskrit Pandits in Pune or Varanasi, who might well have been familiar with the Bhavishya Purana. He was not writing for the philologists, who might have contested his dizzying and idiosyncratic run through history, ticking off instances of the word Hindu. Savarkar inaugurates a populist anti-intellectualism at the same time that he attempts to show that whatever intellectuals could do, he could do better. that is the fun part about Savarkar. He was the Sanjeev Sanyal, the Vivek Ramaswamy, the person who is pretty well educated, a very phenomenal, very good thinker, has fresh ideas, original ideas, but is always anti-establishment. He's always basically saying "F you" to the establishment and the elite class of any field. Liberal sprinklings of Sanskrit phrases and couplets help alleviate and assuage any anxiety about the authority of the text. Given Savarkar's obvious education, erudition, and intellectual ability, the historical section was no aberration. His use of a small selection of Sanskrit quotations was meant to demonstrate to a bourgeois Hindu population holding any number of romantic notions about Sanskrit that he was a learned scholar, and he does not need to bow down before the so-called learned scholars who are not in fact achieving much. And I don't think there's an academic should really complain about random quotes. Okay, that is how at least mainly social sciences, at least sociology operates, because hardly anyone has read any primary source on Indian texts, but everyone just picks up random quotes from here and there and tries to defame Hinduism. So if Savarkar does that, it's just tit for tat. It did not matter whether his Sanskrit quotations were inaccurate or taken out of context, or even if his transliterations of Sanskrit were sufficient to satisfy academic philologists. His aim was to produce awe and thus authority in the reader's imagination. After all, how could someone who could produce from memory 20 Sanskrit quotations, verses from Prithviraj Raso, read while in the Andamans, verses from Gurmukhi texts read while in London, selections from the Bhavishya Purana, and remember the collection of letters in Rajwade's possession about Maratha history, and Taraknath Vachaspati writing in Bengal, writing all the while in prison, be anything other than extraordinary? Wherever Savarkar recognizes a scholarly question or the possibility that some readers might demand greater historical detail, he uses the standard disclaimer that these details are hardly germane to his project. Yes, because that is not even the main point. These are trivial anecdotes. While implying at the... This paper is so weird. I have to keep scrolling for every page. One page is this side, one page is this side. Wait. Okay. While implying at the same time his complete command of the material. For instance, when Savarkar excoriates Buddhism for its political but not religious practices, he writes that dark hints abound in our ancient records to show that at times some foreign Buddhist powers had actually invaded India with an express national and religious aim in view. As evidence, he cites an episode from the Bhavishya Purana. Savarkar came from a generation of late 19th and early 20th century intellectuals whose education allowed them to become equally fluent in English and Sanskrit, like Chandranath Boshu. But being able to translate and compose in Sanskrit is not the same as having a critical knowledge of Sanskrit scholarship. Savarkar had read Rajwade, without a doubt, but his learning was not the same. Nonetheless, he used Sanskrit to claim a reputation as a Hindu scholar who could use the wealth of any ancient learning as the basis of his vision for the future of India. For these reasons, Hindutva cannot simply be viewed as an angry tract, or for that matter, a casual intervention into the political fray. Nor was it an exercise in undisciplined didactism. Its power lay in its strategic use of snippets of authoritative knowledge put together with the directness and simplicity of reactionary tabloid reporting, exactly how the left has won this game, exactly how left wins even today the hearts and minds of English medium educated urban children and youth and adolescents. Okay, that is what Savarkar had begun countering back in 1909. Everything's not going to be an academic journal. I don't think, therefore, that this criticism needs to be taken that seriously. He was not sending these publications to any journals, no. When one reaches the end of the book, one sees the distillation of Savarkar's main line of attack. This is the point in the work when Savarkar's Hindutva offers up its most memorable gem. A Sanskrit couplet in which the concept of allegiance is conceptualized as a pledge. All the earlier sections come down to this one couplet. Asindhu Sindhu Paryanta Yasya Bharata Bhumika Pitrabhu Punya Bhusha Chaivasa Vai Hinduriti Smritaha. The verse is clever. At the close of the essay, it cements the notion that nationalism needs geography rather than history. It is easy to read and understand and simple to memorize for anyone with a rudimentary facility in any of the several Indian languages that have a Sanskritic vocabulary. such as Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Bengali, and at a stretch South Indian languages such as Malayalam and Kannada. Moreover, it does not overtly disallow any community other than the Hindu community from claiming that its holy pilgrimage sites lay within India's ancient geography, basically years before Vinayak concluded that it is in fact a sacred geography. And I think Radha Kumud Mukherjee and Jaduna Sarkar have said as much as well. Muslims and Christians could emphatically claim that India housed their places of worship and was the land of their fathers. But Savarkar was in effect saying that while Hindus had a prior claim to both name, Pitrabhu, the land of one's ancestors, and one's own name as Hindu, and place Hindustan, non-Hindus had to give up their attachment to one or the other. Muslims, Christians, and Jews were as a consequence consigned to a second-order citizenship because they could not transfer their primary, let alone their exclusive sacred allegiance to India. Okay, first of all, since I have not read Savarkar, if anyone has read here, let me know if this conclusion or this insinuation that Savarkar basically was hinting at a second order type of a citizenship for non-Hindus, is that a fair assessment, or has Savarkar himself mentioned this explicitly that non-Hindus will be a second class sort of a citizen? And more so, even if that is the case, is that really unfair a criticism if he's writing that or mentioning that with the qualification, with the caveat that they have to give up either one of those fascinations with other lands or other countries, right, or the Ummah? Having turned India into the ancient home of the mythic Hindus, Savarkar now emphasizes that respect for Hindu culture is as central a tenet as birth and religion. At the end of the work, Savarkar almost turns the tables on his own work. On the one hand, Hindus were the authentic inhabitants of Hindustan because their holy sites and ancestral lands were within its magical boundaries. But on the other, he also uses a modern notion of choice to suggest something that is simultaneously wondrous and simple, which is, everyone can come together to choose to love Hindu culture, even as they might love the land of India. Whether you are Hindu or Muslim, Christian or Jewish, you too can be a part of the fold. What a beautiful thing to say. This is why I'm saying this scholar, Dr. Janaki Bakhle, has been pretty fair. This is Savarkar's quote. Are you a monist, a monotheist, a pantheist, an atheist, an agnostic? Here is ample room, O soul, whatever thou art, to love and grow to thy fullest height and satisfaction in this temple of temples. Ye, who by race, by blood, by culture, by nationality possess almost all the essentials of Hindutva. Ye have only to render wholehearted love to our common mother and recognize her not only as Pitrabhu but even as Punyabhu, and ye who would be most welcome to the Hindu fold. This is a choice which our countrymen and our old kith and kin, the Bohras, Khojas, Mamons and other Mohammedan and Christian communities are free to make, which the Bohras have made. A choice again which must be a choice of love. I don't know how much fairer this can get. Nationalism, in a curious twist, now becomes a matter of choosing to love, and making it so, Savarkar allows for all future generations of militant Hindu nationalists to use the modern concept of political choice as their alibi for prejudice. Oh my god. This is what I was saying in the previous live stream as well. The only thing which I think is very unfair is her repeated use of the word prejudice, which she keeps using without any claims ever getting into the details of why exactly this is prejudice. She discusses some random things, defends Savarkar. In some places, she seemingly defends Savarkar because she might mean some things as a criticism. We might see them as appreciations, but in between all those, in some concluding portions, she keeps mentioning the word prejudice, even though she doesn't give an example of any prejudice. Oh, I guess this is a prejudice that why would you even ask someone to be fully pledge full allegiance to this country? Okay, in that case, that prejudice, use of that word prejudice can be simply a difference of opinion. We can think of it as, okay, even if that is prejudice, that is fair. So let's see, maybe it's fair to use that word here. This sets in place, okay, let me check some comments a bit. M. Shastri is saying Savarkar was cognizant that Christian, Jewish and Muslim communities weren't as loyal to the land as much as Hindus. They had other places that they could go, yeah. Second order citizenship as unfair criticism, I see. Jews, Christians and Muslims, there were plenty Persian ones, yeah, did have allegiance that were not towards India, right? Jews came with the Portuguese and left when the Portuguese committed atrocities. Bhai, is everything okay in Bengal now? What about the protests? Are you safe? Are Hindus safe? Open and available for members of all communities, if not all in the same way. Okay. Yeah, so prejudice. This sets in place a subjunctive nationalism in an if-then. So, some conditions, okay? If-then frame. Had he been a straightforward or brute fascist, as has so often been claimed, he would have altogether ruled out the possibility that any community other than the Hindu community had a legitimate claim on the land. This is why I am loving this scholar. She is being so fair in this statement, at least. See, this is why reading these papers are important, because in academia, let's say if you are writing remotely anything in favor of Hindutva Savarkar someday, which is not possible up till now, you will be able to cite these scholars, because these are mainstream scholars in mainstream universities, mainstream liberal bastions, Duke University Press, UCLA, okay. And you will be able to use this quote from Dr. Janaki Bakhle, that she's saying, if he was a fascist, which everyone in the left claims he was, why would he say this, that use this if-then framework? Instead, he writes in a far more persuasive and seductive vein, implying an inclusive nationalism, open and available for members of all communities, if not all in the same way. I don't know how it is not in the same way. Hindus are already pledging their allegiance to India and Hinduism. So if it is not the same for everyone, what is it? Everyone else is also being said that your allegiance should be to India and have respect for Hinduism. How is that not all in the same way? I don't know. We will turn to the last of the 4 rhetorical strategies employed by Savarkar in the management of affect, love, and the question of choice. What has love got to do with it? Savarkar was a genius poet, so obviously love will have something to do with it. Abhay saying prejudice लगा देती हूँ इससे leftist circle में cancel नहीं. Yeah, nice defense. When Savarkar was repatriated in 1921, it must have seemed the perfect historical moment for him to reassert himself as a new political leader, one who has time in jail for the nation, had been the bard of the past, and was a prophet of the future. Non-cooperation and Khilafat were on the last leg of their journey together before Gandhi was jailed in March 1922. There were other Muslim leaders who did not support Khilafat or the conjoining of religion and politics, but the combination of the INC and Khilafat was felicitous for several reasons. It was a marriage of convenience for the Khilafat leaders, who received the support of the Indian National Congress and in turn insisted that Muslim self-assertion and nationalism were compatible. How? For Gandhi and the Indian National Congress, it ensured the participation of non-elite Muslims in the nationalist movement. From 1920 until the end of 1921, the Khilafat movement and Gandhi's non-cooperation movement moved in concert. However, soon thereafter, the Ali brothers, Muhammad and Shaukat, were arrested, and in March 1922, so was Gandhi, non-cooperation came to a sudden end. Returning to India at this time must have been extraordinarily difficult for Savarkar. He had been exiled from his beloved land and doubtless felt doubly displaced by both Gandhi's success and his failure. Political outcomes that seemed to him irrevocably tied to a very different nationalist ideal. As a young student in London in 1909, he had written a poem called Sagara Prana Talamala. I have read out this poem in one of my videos, in which he had expressed his homesickness, asking the ocean to take him back to India, consecrating their memory, and in his passage on Mother India against Father Thames, when he wrote in Hindutva that the entire territory of the country had been a sacrificial ground, he may well have been channeling a specifically Marathi idea of the soil of the land having been watered by the blood of its martyrs. In Hindutva, Savarkar extends his poem about homesickness into a full-fledged love letter in which he lays out a powerfully transcendent and non-sexual love. It was a love not of women or men or children or parents or siblings. The only true love was love of country or nation, and it is a love against which all others pale. Nationalism was simply the expression of this love of country, and it had to be doubly monogamous. Only one country and only one love. Hindutva is a nationalist autobiography insofar as Savarkar sets himself up as the exemplary, if lonely, figure faithfully and militantly in love with India and proud of the name Hindu and the history it contains. The emphasis on love explains why Muslims and Christians cannot always be brought under the umbrella of the term Hindutva. And whose problem is that? Savarkar argues that it is because their mythology and godmen are of foreign origin, but the more important and telling line in this passage is his explanation that their love is divided. So not monogamous. Polyamory का जगह नहीं है यहाँ पे. India was so transcendently the love object that nothing other than monogamous love would do. Nationalism, in other words, could only be chaste. It could not spill out beyond India's border. So I'll give you a spoiler, guys. I have read the conclusion of this paper. There she makes a very interesting, almost funny criticism, okay? She says that Savarkar had sort of a patriarchal husbandish view of of patriotism, okay? That why will you go and cheat and sleep with someone else? Why shouldn't you love just me? That is a patriarchal husband sort of a view that Savarkar has. The Khilafat movement's demand for dual allegiance would have seemed to Savarkar the opposite of such chaste monogamous love. Love for India, her land, her people, her sages, her rivers, her mountains, and her literature was imposed by him as a necessary condition for being welcomed into the Hindu fold. Why is this so hard? Whenever Savarkar wrote in the poetic or sentimental vein, he wrote of this love for a river, for the Indian Ocean, for the hills, for the epics, for mythological heroes. In conclusion, he proposed that such a love of country and culture was an option for non-Hindu communities that wished to exercise it. He was clear that quote-unquote foreigners like Sister Nivedita and Annie Besant, both Irish women committed to Indian nationalism, or Dr. Konrad Elst, were received into the fold not because they were Christian as opposed to Muslim, but because of their undivided love for India. About Sister Nivedita, he wrote, "Our patriotic and noble-minded sister had adopted our land Asindhu Sindhu Paryanta as her Pitrabhu. She truly loved it as such. And had our nation been free, we would have been the first to bestow the right of citizenship on such loving souls." About Besant and Sister Nivedita, Savarkar claims that so soft-hearted and sensitive to the touch of love as a race we Hindus are, that Sister Nivedita or a person like her is almost unconsciously deceived in the Hindu fold. Guys, I'm telling you, I have read a lot of commie propaganda literature, and someone with the writing skills of Savarkar, where he writes 2-3 lines and immediately you feel an emotional connection with the topic that he is justifying or propagating, or the point he's making, right? If he really wanted some sort of fascist Hindu militantism, he would do it like this. He would be able to achieve that. He has the power of the power of pen, जो बोलते हैं, mightier than the sword है. ये वैसा writing skill है भाई. People are lucky that he did not choose that path. In other words, where there was a problem, it was because of their divided love, the love of a community that had gone elsewhere. Individuals like Sister Nivedita, Besant, and the Emperor Akbar, despite being foreign, could nonetheless be unconsciously received into the fold. Like Dara Shikoh, A.R. Rahman. We don't have a dearth of such examples. Yet again, and anytime you have a debate with leftists, it's so primitive and so base level debates that are still going on between the right and left, that the much more fun, juicier debates and properly, challenging debates that there are in India at the moment are between the different folds inside the right. The debate between right and left is class 2-3 level debates. So the left will immediately say, if they are face to face with the Hindutwadi, that are you saying all Muslims are bad? Are you saying therefore A.R. Rahman is bad, or Zakir Hussain is bad? Should they be kicked out as well? And who the fuck is saying that in the Indian right wing, guys? Yet again, Savarkar gives himself an alibi and a defense. Akbar, Sister Nivedita, and Besant were Hindu not because of their religion or even because of a principle of religious tolerance, but because they chose to love India. Why would such a reminder to the community in the form of a love letter seem necessary to Savarkar in 1922-23? Had someone denied his beloved, meaning the country, the love he wrote of so passionately in Hindutva? Based on Savarkar's conception of love, there was indeed someone denying it, Gandhi. Therefore, not only did he reiterate that his love was pure. By implication, he also suggested that Hindus should be aware Gandhi's call to embrace Khilafat. Hindutva was a political argument made in a poetic register. It was an argument with and against an unnamed Gandhi at an opportune moment when he seemed finished with politics. Hindutva was also a political cry from behind prison walls, reminding the larger world outside that even if Gandhi was no longer on the political scene, Savarkar was back. He was still a leader, a politician capable of pulling together a nationalist community, but unlike Gandhi, he was offering a sense of Hinduness that could be the basis for a more genuine and, in the end, more effective nationalism than that of the Mahatma. The startling change for its time was Savarkar's assertion that it was not religion that made Hindus Hindu. If Gandhi had officiated at the marriage of religion and politics, and Khilafat leaders were using the symbols of religion to forge a community, Savarkar argued that name and place were what bound the Hindu community, not religion. Savarkar assailed, quote, the unfortunate misunderstanding that owes its origin to the confusing similarity between the two terms Hindutva and Hinduism, end quote. Savarkar seems to want to move away from a Christian-centric conception of religion, जो कि आजकल हमारा mainstream slogan हो गया है जैसे कि religion is not the same as dharma. A Christian-centric conception of religion by demarcating between Hindutva and Hinduism, by suggesting that the tva in the former is not the same as the ism in the latter, exactly. But he does not do what previous Hindu thinkers had done, turning the tva into a philosophy of life, as opposed to a Christian-centric ideological ism. The tva in Savarkar's conception of... Actually, it is very, very true what Savarkar is saying here. Ism... It does not just have a negative connotation, it is a criticism, okay? Let's say, I love coffee, but then I make videos on coffee being the best thing on earth. Replace protein shake, replace food, replace tea out of your life, or you will die. Saying those things, those sorts of things would be called coffeeism, right? So ism is the propagation of one possibly good thing in some context and claiming that to be and lying about it and saying that that is the only possible solution for everything, and propagating it very unethically and immorally. Okay, that is ism, but that is not how we use the letters tva in Sanskrit based languages. So this is absolutely a very brilliant thing to point out. Many people have a confusion about this. Hinduness is not Hinduness might be Hindutva. Hinduism is definitely not Hindutva. Although, to be fair, people who use the word Hinduism, even well-meaning people, they don't know that ism holds this negative connotation or that ism means that thing. क्योंकि हमारा English तो है नहीं first language, तो वो एक misconception है. But it is important to remember that ism does mean that. And interestingly, Sitaram Goel in How I Became a Hindu flips the entire concept. He says that Hinduism is a religion, but Abrahamic religions are not religions, they are just political imperialist ideologies. Christian-centric ideologicalism. The tva in Savarkar's conception of Hindutva refers not to the mind, soul or heart or to devotion, but to the love of the land. It is not just any land, but a specific one, India, heightened by an extra sense of symbolic value. As a consequence of this love, a distinction can be made between those who love for the land, those whose love for the land makes them Hindus, that is Christians, Muslims like the Emperor Akbar and Sister Nivedita, and those who, like the Khilafat Muslims and Gandhi, either have a love for the land that is divided or worse, are indifferent to the land. Paradoxically, Savarkar speaks of loving the land. The Khilafatists extolled a united Islam, but neither Khilafat nor Hindutva as a concept refers us directly to the nation. Savarkar does that job by making Hindutva the act of bestowing love on a stretch of land and by seeking with such an act to inaugurate a national history. The two events that coincide with and exemplify the act are the process of naming, that is language, and the proliferation of heroes, both men and women who walk on hallowed ground, meaning India. In making this move, Savarkar does not simply discard Hinduism as a descriptive term for a better one. The fundamental negative contribution of Hindutva was to install a new term for nationalist discourse. Negative meaning not a criticism here, meaning not something else, okay? Not that. This. That is what is meant by the word negative here. The fundamental negative contribution of Hindutva was to install a new term for nationalist discourse, one that was both modern and secular. If open, if open to a secular understanding of religious identity. In place of religion qua religion, he secularized a plethora of Hindu religious leaders. In so doing, he did not create a sterilely secular nationalism. He did quite the opposite. He enchanted a secular nationalism by placing a mythic community into a magical land. By making love of the mythic land of India an active choice, okay? The love of the mythic land of India becomes an active choice in Savarkar's conception of patriotism. Active choice of political allegiance. He was also challenging the territorial implications of Gandhi's support of the Khilafat movement for the emerging nationalist imagination in India. As V.S. Naipaul first commented, Gandhi was utterly uninterested in territorial sovereignty or physical borders and boundaries. He was trying to be a social reformer. One could search Gandhi's autobiography or other works in vain for any detailed or heartfelt description of the countryside or landscape, whether in South Africa or in India. Nationalism for Gandhi was always about people, whether they were Hindus or Muslims. His support of Khilafat indicates that he was willing to extend India's nationalist geography to recruit Indian Muslims to a national cause. How was that going to happen without loyalty? Gandhi would later assert that even the British were welcome to stay in India. That is what also Savarkar is saying, but Gandhi is saying that without any criterion, without any qualification, no, without any condition. That is the problem with Gandhi here. Gandhi would later assert that even the British were welcome to stay in India after independence, so long as they embraced vegetarianism and abnegated violence. What the? अरे ठीक है, vegetarianism तो बहुत बढ़िया है. Why can't you just specify it to things that Savarkar was saying? Why was he? How is vegetarianism the condition here? Shakti worshipping का नाम नहीं सुना है क्या? Savarkar wrote about the land in a way that generated both powerful attachment and powerful exclusivity. See, this is vegetarianism. Ism is a very apt thing here, because you are maybe religiously vegetarian, or maybe you are vegetarian because you actually love animals and you believe in animal rights. But you have a weird fucking justification for that, and that is vegetarianism. Savarkar wrote about the land in a way that generated both powerful attachment and powerful exclusivity, without ever explicitly claiming that this exclusivity was directed toward non-Hindus. We are now so accustomed to Gandhi's quixotic claims and actions being vindicated by incorporation into a naturalized and teleological account of the nation that we take them as unexceptional. However, to many nationalists at the time, not just Savarkar but also Jinnah and Ambedkar, they may not have been so. They may not have seemed so. Given that most anti-colonial nationalist movements emphasize the primordiality of a nation's territorial sovereignty, Gandhi's nationalist focus on people and religion to the exclusion of all else may now seem far-sighted. But at the time, Savarkar's Hindutva argued that nationalism had nothing to do with actual people, let alone their religion, and everything to do with a mythic community in a magical land. So you could say that Savarkar was being more... He had that important separation, I think, that one needs in terms of research. I'll come back to that later. If the first essence of Hindutva was territory, invoked not through the modern instrument of the cartographic map, but through the making present of a visual landscape, then every single name and place was a footprint of an equally mythic and powerful history, connecting a sacred and secular geography through pilgrimage, reminding a Hindu community of its birth, its genealogy, and its heritage. Such a compilation of name after name, place after place, text after text, generated not just a visual alliteration, but also a visual architecture. It was through this pile on pile of name and place that an avowedly ancient edifice, the nation, was built, modernized, and enchanted. It is no accident that in the course of writing an 88-page essay, Savarkar inserts into the passages at least 60 proper names, caste names, names of people, places, lands that were known by different names, names of texts, authors. It is the means by which he enchants the natural geography of India and bends its history to the service of a modern nation. Or kya karega aadmi? Or what else is the relevance of history? I still have not understood. Conclusion. In this previous book on the 1857 rebellion, Savarkar had argued that India was a nation demonstrated by the unified Hindu and Muslim struggle against the British. The rebellion had failed, according to him, because it lacked a coherent plan for the future. He maintained a romantic notion of two natural communities living side by side, coming together in a common nationalist struggle. This was for him the marriage of two communities. But in Hindutva, the romance is surrendered because one of the two natural communities of India had discovered a divided love. Hindutva has all the passion and possessiveness of a jealous and patriarchal husband who reminds his wife that she may not look at anyone else, let alone form an attachment. Kitna kharab cheez hai. Khilafat and Gandhi were suggesting a separation, not a divorce. Even so, Hindutva would become the first salvo in a long series of the spurned lover's anger at the one who got away, demanding the severing of the relationship. His anger shows through in the last pages of his text. Quote, to render it impossible for others to betray her or to subject her to unprovoked attacks by any of those panisms that are struggling forth from continent to continent. End quote. As a matter of historical record, despite the sway of international communism, there was no panism in India to which he returned other than the Khilafat movement. As a result, the writing of Hindutva put the question of the uneasy but accommodative nature of Hindu-Muslim politics on the table as a problem of allegiance. Gandhi had made one choice. Savarkar as the prodigal Hindu son or husband made another choice. And Savarkar would indict Gandhi without naming him of guilt by association with nationalist promiscuity. An intolerable oxymoron given his, according to Savarkar, because of his geographic understanding of monogamy. What a weird criticism. Typically, Savarkar's argument in Hindutva has been seen as a calculated move to produce a future vote bank of Hindus. In a provocative article, Ashish Nondi, the brother of the film producer Pritish Nondi, argued that Savarkar was a quintessentially deracinated modern Hindu who could not understand that the sacred and secular were not extricable for most Indians. I guess it is a kind of a fair criticism, no? Nondi said Savarkar could not understand that for most Indians, sacred and secular were not extricable. Both claims have some measure of accuracy in them, though electoral politics were not the immediate issue at the time Hindutva was written and published. More than anything else, there was a tremendous sense of betrayal and failure in the country and a significant vacuum in political leadership. Savarkar sought to fill this vacuum through a nationalist credo that was both secular and Indian, necessarily invoking ritual and mythology as fundamental features of the Indian modern. Yeah, this is fair. That he championed a militant Hindu nationalism, we need not doubt at all. But we will miss the point if we simply assume he was sitting in prison writing a manifesto of Hindu fascism. This is why Janaki Bakhle is a fair and honest scholar. We may disagree with her on some issues, but she is being insanely fair. Hindutva was written not as a text for a fully formed nation or as a militant call to throw out all non-Hindus from the nation. It was an unembarrassed and deeply sentimental love letter to the country and the land. It was also a political cry and a cultural call to remind a community that through the use of certain mnemonic devices, it could reimagine itself as a community with a history and ancient heritage. But it entailed a majoritarian politics. Okay, after this paper ends, which is just the last paragraph, we will discuss why majoritarianism might not be bad, okay? We'll discuss the introduction of this book that I bought yesterday. Okay, it was also a political cry and a cultural call to remind a community that through the use of certain mnemonic devices, it could reimagine itself as a community with a history and ancient heritage, but it entailed a majoritarian politics. Gandhi embraced the Khilafat movement in an effort to recruit the minority community to the nationalist cause. Savarkar chose instead to address the majority community of India, leaving the Muslim community to wonder whether it could ever be fully included in the national community represented by Hindus. Gandhi was assassinated on January 30, 1948 by an associate of Savarkar's named Nathuram Godse. Godse was an ardent admirer of Savarkar from the same caste and region. When Savarkar was arrested for his association with Gandhi's assassination, it was not by the colonial government but by the police of an independent India he had fought for all his life. He was released because the government could find no solid evidence of complicity in the crime at a time when anything could be found to justify arresting anyone. Despite his association with the right-wing party, the RSS, to which Godse had once belonged and whose Hindu nationalist manifesto was aggressive and militant, but that was damning enough, and living the rest of his life as a recluse, he became forever associated with the death of his principal rival Gandhi. History has been far kinder to Gandhi than to Savarkar. Yet this essay has argued that to understand Savarkar's critical role in Indian modern political discourse, his nationalist imagination needs to be seen side by side with Gandhi's, rather than solely as the expression of an unrepentant fascism, or as the ranting of the leader of a fringe movement. Savarkar represented a powerful alternative to Gandhi, both in his early revolutionary zeal and in his later enunciation of a territorial basis for the emergence of a politically potent and culturally unapologetic national community. Hindutva is a powerful call to the nascent yet allegedly ancient nation that is about place rather than people, despite its potentially devastating implications for non-Hindus. Hindutva devastating implications क्या है मुझे पता नहीं है. Hindutva makes it a point not to sound religious, but of course it does not take much to make it so. Hindutva does not intentionally sound xenophobic, but it can be used to do so. Yeah. Hindutva derives much of its power from sounding simultaneously poetic and prosaic, reasonable and subtle, inclusive and exclusive. Yeah, depends on who you are asking. When accused of anti-Muslim fascism, Savarkar's supporters can still point to the sentence about Akbar's morality to counter the charge. Savarkar could be read as subtle or not, fascist or not, reasonable or not. A mythic community in a magical land, with an enchanted, if subjunctive nationalism on the one hand, a xenophobic, exclusionary and secular nationalism on the other hand. One might well ask what would have happened if history reversed Savarkar's failure with Gandhi's success. Would he have supported some of the virulent and overtly anti-Muslim politics of contemporary Indian political formations such as the RSS, Bajrang Dal or the VHP? Would his secularism have been merely a shallow alibi? His tolerance of minorities stretched so thin that it would have produced a very different kind of nation-state in India? These are important questions. But the aim of this essay is far more restricted. I have asserted that Savarkar was an important and non-trivial historical figure who needs serious and careful historical analysis and scrutiny. Though Savarkar clearly lost out in his immediate political contest with Gandhi, his politics hardly disappeared. And in some respects, his political views have indeed triumphed in ways and at times that have had devastating consequences for the Muslim population in particular. What was a small book is now a full-fledged political and intellectual discourse that goes by the same name. I have shown here, however, that Savarkar needs to be viewed through the lens of his time and circumstances. If we are not to allow the Hindu right to take, own and use the historiography of Savarkar, we need to take seriously his skill in the marshalling of arguments that had perhaps more elemental power than Gandhi's, that could be read as more or less benign or dangerous depending on context, interpretation and the colonial conditions of India's national history. Okay. This is why I am saying that people who were अच्छा नेट चला गया क्या? What has something crashed? Let me see. I think my Google Meet has crashed a little. Yeah. Okay. हाँ ठीक हो गया. So those who are criticizing me for buying Janaki Bakhle's book, this is why you must read books, not excerpts, not the bio of the author, not the introduction, not the first 3 chapters. Okay, this is why. Anyway, now we will discuss this book a bit. First, let me check some comments. Kanishk Saini is saying, if you read apology letters and their timings, with what was happening outside, it makes sense. 1911, British Crown announced pardon for prisoners. His letters were in the flow with what British wants. And I don't really see how an apology can be criticized after living 10 years in prison. I was discussing this with that mysterious right-wing sociologist who follows our channel and keeps sending me papers. And he was saying that, yeah, fuck you, I'll give you an apology letter. If I was arrested at that time, I would have given an apology by the evening and got out next day and went on with my work. Savarkar at least stayed in prison. Bakhle is conceding that Gandhi was proven wrong and Savarkar was proven right with the partition. Yeah, kind of. Nina is saying, Dada, on Sandesh Khali, one leftist was telling me West Bengal is better in communal harmony than Uttarakhand. Yes, and Mickey Mouse defeated Batman at the end of Avengers 4. Okay, so guys, this book is a beautiful looking, very pretty book. Books should not be judged by their covers, but I fail to follow that a lot of times. But thankfully I have read How I Became a Hindu, which has... Voice of India is a low budget publication house, obviously. They don't have the money to do beautiful covers and illustrations, of course. But this book is, guys, so nicely made, so beautifully illustrated. The design is by the author's wife, okay? Look at the back. And the page quality is so nice. I'll tell you, this publication house is Garuda Publications, which is very right leaning, so it will be thrown out if you cite this person in any academic journal for now. But times will change someday. But my point is, Rupa Publications, who has published this, you see these 3 history of Indian philosophy. And then I have 3 books by Garuda as well. This Reclaiming Hindu Temples by Dr. Chandni Sengupta. And this book is called The Majoritarian Myth by Dr. Kaushik Gangopadhyay. And I have Sanjay Dixit's Unbreaking India. All 3 are from Rupa Publications. And I have Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Idiot, also from Rupa Publications. These 2 make such beautifully looking books, beautiful material, beautiful font, beautiful page quality, that I think there's great hope for Indian publication. And I think people are really reading books, or at least buying them, because otherwise how would these small time publishers have so much money and resources for making such great books? Okay. And especially Rupa Publications is not a small time publication, they are a long time publisher. But my point is, I'm comparing this with other badly published physical copies of different books. Okay, for example, Sri Aurobindo's book, which I've talked about many times in this context, that book is this thick. It's about 1200 pages long. Okay, so how is a book this thin 1200 pages long? Because the pages are like a beautiful transparent sari. Okay, if you look at a page of Sri Aurobindo's book, The Life Divine, with the wrong angle of the light, you will be able to read 5-6 pages behind. Okay, and also 1500 rupees wala book of Nrsimha Prasad Bhaduri on character analysis of all the characters of Ramayana, okay, called Ramayani. It is this thick, which has come out from the biggest publishing house of Bengal of all time, Anandabazar Publications. Even that has thin, flimsy pages, okay, you can read about 1-2 pages downwards. But I guess they have some sort of justification that if they made those pages really thick, it would be an even thicker book and no one would buy it, or it would have to be 2 volumes. But I don't know why one should sacrifice the page quality. Okay, so let me tell you about this book and who all have written what about it. So some testimonials. No, I won't read the quotes of the testimonials. I'll read the full testimonials. They are by Sanjeev Sanyal, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, etc. Okay, let me see how many are watching. This book, I have read just the introduction so far, is a beautiful defense or criticism of this thing that leftists keep throwing at the non-left, that majoritarianism politics ho raha hai, majoritarianism ho raha hai. Why that does not make sense, that is the topic of the book. And so far it's beautifully written. There are some fresh original ideas in this book. So the excerpt at the back of the book says, the blurb says, this book analyzes why majoritarianism is a deeply flawed idea. In a road accident involving a big vehicle and a small vehicle, should the blame automatically assigned to the larger vehicle or to the vehicle that contravened traffic rules? Whom should we blame? The believer in majoritarianism effectively says that the bigger vehicle is always to blame no matter what. The sane view would be to find the vehicle that broke the traffic rules and call out its guilt for the accident. The book has simply taken that sane path, scientifically and engagingly, to demonstrate that it is flawed to blame the majority for any social intolerance. For a scientific discussion around majoritarianism, we have shed the notion of symmetry of all cultures, okay, that all cultures are equal, etc. Following the ideas of economist Ronald Coase and philosopher Karl Popper, we have defined the notion of linear theory of social evolution, which actually creates a moral impetus for intolerance in people's minds. Okay, he's saying that this thing called LTSE, linear theory of social evolution, that is what creates a moral impetus for intolerance in people's minds. And what is that? That is the topic of the book, and we will get to that a little right now, because that is explained pretty well in the introduction section. If a community, irrespective of its being the majority or a minority, has an LTSE, has a linear theory of social evolution, it becomes the source of social intolerance. We have formulated 2 hypotheses, the typical majoritarian hypothesis and our linear theory of social evolution hypothesis, to explain the source of social intolerance. We test the suitability of these hypotheses based on the idea of economist Friedrich Hayek, who is the favorite economist of Sanjeev Sanyal. The test conclusively demonstrates the superiority of our LTSE hypotheses over the majoritarian hypotheses. Friedrich Hayek is a Nobel Prize winner, and when he went on stage to collect the Nobel Prize, in his Nobel winning speech, he said that we economists have a disease, we think we know everything and we can predict everything. The solution to social intolerance may lie in the Indic understanding of the pursuit of Satya and Ahimsa as understood in the Mahabharata, rather than any theory. We have demonstrated how the liberal troika of diversity, equity and inclusivity violates the principles of Satya and Ahimsa. to the detriment of sustainable social harmony. Okay, now let me, for some context, who is the author? Kaushik Gangopadhyay is an economist who earned his PhD from the University of Rochester in 2007. He is a professor in the IIM Kozhikode. He has published many articles in reputed refereed international journals and has a co-edited book published by Springer Verlag. He also enjoys writing popular articles, having published in platforms like DNA, First Post, Swarajya and Mathrubhumi. He lives in Kozhikode with his wife and 2 children. Okay. Yeah, so first the testimonials, guys. First from Anand Ranganathan. Okay, let me have a sip of coffee now. Here to learn, yes. And it was Harshmandar's idea. In a world thirsty for clarity and practicality, this is Anand Ranganathan writing, okay? In a world thirsty for clarity and practicality, this book couldn't have come at a more opportune time. Beyond the sheer brilliance of its ideas and insights, I applaud Professor Gangopadhyay for his unwavering courage in penning this remarkable book. Sanjeev Sanyal is writing, the term majoritarianism is used in India as a convenient way to demonize Hindus without any reference to first principles. In this book, Kaushik investigates the term using well-established intellectual frameworks on social tolerance. The conclusions will surprise many readers. Okay, next testimonial is by someone called, the editorial director of Swarajya, okay, Raghavan Jagannathan. He has given a more elaborate sort of a review. Majoritarianism is a vacuous word that left liberals use all the time. This book convincingly demolishes this idea and shows up the concept as both untenable and illegitimate. A fascinating theoretical framework, the LTSE, the Linear Theory of Social Evolution framework, is intelligently enunciated. Even without this theory, sufficient empirical evidence has been provided to clearly establish that the fashionable criticism of majoritarianism, whatever it means, is a complete red herring, as it involves engaging with a straw man that left liberals find convenient. The book ends with a stout defense of Indic approaches to social and political issues, which, despite its flaws, which are not denied, may end up constituting a very constructive approach to our contemporary concerns. There are also brilliant detours demolishing bogus Marxist and postmodernist doctrines, and intellectual tour de force written in simple, spare, direct style. And because of the direct style is why this paper, if you cite this book, it will be thrown out of any legitimate social science academic journal. Definitely recommended as an addition to the reading list of intellectually curious and discerning persons. Yes, not for academic pursuits. Okay. This has not been written by the editorial director of Swarajya. Sorry, this has been written by someone called Jayatirth Jerry Rao. He is the author of The Indian Conservative, an Impressionistic Survey of Indian Right-Wing Thought. Okay, now the following review is by Raghav Jagannathan from editorial director of Swarajya. The Majoritarian Myth. How Scientific Social Theories Create Disharmony. This book promises to be a terrific book. The concept is not just promising but vital to truth. 1. I think Gangopadhyay's theory on the majoritarian myth and the LTSE being key determinants of intolerance holds. 2. We must make and emphasize a simple point, which is that all majorities are contextual. Majority cannot only be about race, religion, etc. It can be about anything, including political attitudes or vocation. This is exactly what Amartya Sen would have said. Amartya Sen would very much agree with this statement, because he believes in multidimensional identity, not making one identity everything. 3. In the Indian context, I believe that the whole idea of majoritarianism is nonsense, for identity evolution was, as Gangopadhyay has put it, experiential and evolutionary. It was not based on theory or scripture specifically. Exactly. Which is in fact used as a criticism by leftists to say that Hinduism to 1947 mein janma. 4. Our courts recognize only religious and linguistic majorities, with the state as the unit for counting, which is why I'm saying fuck the idea of linguistic breakup of states. Make them and change state division after every 5 or 10 years, okay? For a few years, keep different states based on sampradaya lines, then on caste lines, then on profession lines, profession meaning today's jati lines, okay? All IT personnel will live in one state, all musicians will live in one state. And then after 10 years, make them live on based on what music genres they like. All metalheads will live in one state. all folk music lovers will live in one state, all Pratik Kuhad lovers will be sent out of the country, etc. But that will prove to you that ये रीजनल शॉविनिज्म का चुतियापा तुम सिर्फ कर रहे हो क्योंकि तुम्हारे दिमाग में नहीं घुस रहा है कि लैंग्वेज इज नॉट द ओनली थिंग, ओके, एंड स्पेशली if your language is basically understood by almost the rest of the country, okay. Let's see how much fun you have living with different people based on different choices, okay. Maybe you love to live, if you're a metalhead who's also a regional chauvinist, maybe you'll prefer to live with just metalheads in your state. Maybe you'll realize that even the metalhead identity isn't sufficient. Maybe you'll prefer to live with just Shaktas if you're a Shakta. So I think that should be done on an experimental basis. Okay. 4. Our courts recognize only religious and linguistic majorities, with the state as the unit for counting. But the average population of each Indian district is more than 2 million, which is larger than 80 countries in the world. Majorities cannot be determined in such large units like country or states of such large sizes. UP is number 6 in terms of population. 5. When Hinduism itself is a loose construct, Hinduism cannot be equated with the majority. Beautiful. In fact, often Hindus are defined as none of the above. That is, persons who are not Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Jains or Buddhists. Also, denial of equal rights forced the Ramakrishna Mission to call itself a non-Hindu denomination in the 1980s, but the Supreme Court denied it that privilege. Clearly, the purpose of references to majoritarianism is only to deny Hindus equal rights because it is used selectively. कहीं पे बोल रहा है कि ये majority है, कहीं पे बोल रहा है ये religion नहीं है. 6. The exclusion of tribes or Vanvasis from Hinduism for political purposes is also a contradiction. If people other than the above 5 religious communities are deemed Hindus, the recent move to call them Adivasis and thus not Hindus is clearly a political maneuver. It appears that the political intent is to deny Hindus equal rights by calling them an 80% majority and then denying them the same in reality to divide them. Okay. कहीं पे conveniently बोल रहा है 80% है, कहीं पे बोल रहा है कि नहीं वो लोग तो हिंदू नहीं है. There is no logic as to how a majority is determined. 7. Today, ideological and other other identifiers of identity are excluded from the definition of majoritarian, which is what something Amartya Sen would also criticize. Which is why liberals can cancel anyone who is not a liberal and still not be attacked for majoritarianism, because liberal identity is also an identity, and that should also be called out for majoritarianism because that's the majority in academic campuses or even academic journals. Gangopadhyay is right to conclude that the term majoritarian has no meaning beyond a deliberate political attempt by some people to deny others equal rights. This is the review of Raghavan Jagannathan, editorial director of Swarajya. Next review is by someone called Abhinav Agarwal. I have no idea who it is. It's written that he is an author. Professor Kaushik Gangopadhyay has undertaken a fascinating and important study on the crucial ethical and political conundrum of majoritarianism and the complex array of issues associated with it. He has also constructed an original panoply of conceptual methodologies. Oh, sorry. This is written by Dr. Gautam Sen, okay? He's a former academic at the London School of Economics and Political Science who was also one of the people who was invited to the launching of J.S.I. Deepak's book, India That is Bharat. He's a very reputed guy. From in the Indic circles, in Indic intellectual circles. Okay. He has also constructed an original panoply of conceptual methodologies to analyze the bewildering practical realities of majoritarian politics. Dr. Gautam Sen. Now Abhinav Agarwal says, written on a solid academic footing, this is a much needed book on how certain ideologically motivated and politically expedient myths have not only been propagated but allowed to become unquestionable dogmas in India. Kaushik not only examines the issues and perils of majoritarianism and the myths around them, but also seeks to examine them from first-order principles. In his sweeping survey, he examines such issues as social evolution, politics and religion, caste, liberalism, the origins of Marxism, and more importantly, its tenets that have been at the root of much of the vocabulary one finds in use today, including an unshakable belief in the enforcement of equity as measured in outcomes and not opportunities. Equality of outcome, not opportunities, which is the main problem with equality conversations in leftist circles. This is a timely and well-researched book on a topic that deserves the kind of attention that Kaushik has provided. This book is dedicated to Baba Shri Ashok Kumar Gangopadhyay. Is he the son of the Justice Ashok Kumar Gangopadhyay, who had enough skepticism to become a communist and enough independent-mindedness to exit communism in the heyday of communism? I am blessed to inherit a bit of both of these qualities from him and as his son. And dedicated to Murari Maharaj, Swami Kripa Maya Nanda, Kripa Mayananda, who taught me science in class and, more crucially, the idea of Karma Yoga through his living. I am blessed to have him as my teacher. So he was basically a student of Ramakrishna Mission then. In Narendrapur, where recently those teachers got beaten up in full view of a camera which was uploaded on Twitter, who is still absconding, by the way, because the principal called those guys to beat up those teachers who were complaining about the principal. That happened in Narendrapur, not in the Ramakrishna Mission School, of course. Okay, now we will read the foreword by Dr. Anand Ranganathan, okay? Let me have a sip of coffee. Okay, I have decided from now on that I am not going to read forewords before reading at least some portion of the book. Today I am reading the foreword for the first time after having read the complete introduction, because I have realized something after reading a lot of books in the last 2 years, is that actually I should have understood this much earlier. Forewords are basically an advertisement and justification and apologia for the book, which is given as a marketing gimmick and to cover up for the author's lack of skills of not being able to articulate his arguments properly, okay? For example, and that does not mean that the author actually lacks the skills to argue for his case. No. This is sort of an extra precautionary measure, okay? That if at all one does not end up reading the complete book, or if he's not convinced by the contents of the book, at least this foreword by this famous person may motivate him. So that colors your reception of the book, and it distorts your reading of the book, okay? So I think forewords should be read much later on. And as an example, I will tell you, I have read Annihilation of Caste almost till half, and because I did not get time, I did not finish it, but I have read again the last 3-4 pages, okay? It's a gigantic speech, but I read it without any foreword because that's a version of the speech I got. But all the people, especially in leftist academia, all of them who have read Annihilation of Caste have read the one with the foreword by Arundhati Roy, which is a massive distortion of what the text was meant to be, okay? People who have read that version and people like me who have read just Ambedkar's text will have completely different interpretations, okay? So Arundhati Roy has absolutely misinterpreted the text deliberately. So keeping that in mind, I have decided not to read the foreword, but since I've read the introduction, I can say that he is on a great path to pretty well arguing his case. So therefore, let's read the foreword written by Anand Ranganathan. In the captivating world of the majoritarian myth, which is the name of the book, the majoritarian myth, how unscientific social theories create disharmony. Interesting name, no, for the book. अच्छा ये mic थोड़ा इधर आ गया है. हाँ. Okay. We embark on a thought-provoking expedition through the twists and turns of societal narratives. Driven by an unwavering commitment to unraveling the truth, this book by Professor Gangopadhyay invites us to explore the intricate tapestry of our social fabric, where perceptions often lead us astray. Imagine this, a world where every societal woe, every challenge that surfaces, is routinely attributed to the actions or beliefs of the majority. Well, you won't have to imagine too hard because it's a scenario that has become all too familiar in our contemporary discourse. But is this majoritarian myth the full story? This book, with the skill of a seasoned detective, peels back the layers, revealing the complexities beneath the surface. As a scientist, I found myself captivated by the rigorous analysis within these pages. It challenges us to dive beneath the headlines, to see beyond the surface, and to uncover the deeper truths that often evade our grasp. One striking revelation lies in the heart of our constitutional frameworks. While designed to safeguard minority rights, could they inadvertently harbor biases against the majority? This book invites us to question, to ponder, and to reevaluate the very foundations of our social contracts. But this is not a mere history lesson. This journey takes us back in time, from the insights of Alexis de Tocqueville and John Stuart Mill to the growth of liberalism and cultural Marxism. These historical threads weave a rich tapestry of ideologies that have shaped our perceptions of majority and minority. The journey this book embarks on is nothing short of groundbreaking. It's an exciting exploration that starts by highlighting the critical distinction between theory-driven worldviews and empirical-driven worldviews, which is why it's said that Hinduism is not a faith-based religion, it's an experiential religion. As a scientist, I have often found myself at odds with certain social science theories. What's so thrilling about this book is that it doesn't just point out these theories' shortcomings, their unfalsifiability and inability to replicate results. It offers a transformative solution. It takes these theories out of the realm of abstraction and firmly plants them in the fertile soil of empirical reality. In a world thirsty for clarity and practicality, this book couldn't have come at a more opportune time. Beyond the sheer brilliance of its ideas and insights, I applaud Professor Gangopadhyay for his unwavering courage in penning this remarkable book. He has confronted tough issues that many academics and public intellectuals shy away from, thus staking his reputation and career. It's a feat worthy of admiration. Let's dive into these feats. The first being his audacious challenge to the prevalent notion that liberalism is a one-size-fits-all solution. Professor Gangopadhyay has taken on this intellectual behemoth head-on, revealing many unsavory details underneath. The second feat, he has shattered the myth that all cultures and religions are identical. In an era where such assumptions are often treated as the default generalization, he employs rigorous scientific analysis to unveil the truth. Not all paths are equal. Not all beliefs stand on the same ground. It's a bold assertion, backed by evidence. There's a striking imbalance among cultures and religions. Some are inherently more tolerant than others. And when individuals from less tolerant backgrounds commit acts of intolerance, he doesn't shy away from addressing the root causes. As I have repeatedly said many times, we tend to snare the fundamentalists, spare the fundamentals. Professor Gangopadhyay explores history's darkest moments in the form of various genocides, looking at them through a scientific lens. He refuses to accept conventional wisdom of the majoritarian hypothesis being the explanatory mechanism for such genocides as gospel, challenging the prevailing assumptions in academia and the media. But that's just the beginning. He takes on two prevailing myths of our times with unmatched vigor. First, he questions whether diversity, equity, and inclusion are the lofty ideals and fundamental principles of a just society, or are they sinister and misguided products of the liberal worldview that ultimately result in hampering social harmony. However, the most eye-opening revelation lies in his examination of social justice, a term tossed around in every conversation and debate today. Get ready for this. He uncovers the uncomfortable truth that what we call social justice is at its core envy, jealousy. Envy, a powerful and universally recognized emotion, has undergone a clever makeover and is now being sold as social justice for all to embrace. Yet, the book is not just a recognition of problems, it's a call to action. It challenges us to re-examine our understanding of truth and nonviolence, two pillars of a harmonious society, truth and nonviolence, Satya and Ahimsa. What solution does the book provide? I will not spoil the answer for the readers, but to quote one of my favorite authors, George Orwell, during times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. Professor Gangopadhyay is a defender of our dharmic civilization. Speaking up for Hindu causes and defending Hindu consciousness comes with the benefit of being cancelled, deplatformed, declared a persona non grata, and the loss of academic and social prestige. And this is done by the liberal and open-minded academia to the largest extent. So, pick up the book as an essential reading for a guiding framework to navigate the battle of narratives and shatter the veil of ignorance. Dr. Anand Ranganathan. Now we will get into the introduction. That's all we'll read about the book, of course, because I don't want people to know about this book fully from my videos. I want people to buy this book. Okay. Introduction. Majoritarianism considers the majority to be oppressors of the minority always. Therefore, whenever, wherever, in whichever issues two communities, one belonging to the majority and the other from the minority, are in conflict with each other, the blame completely goes to the majority community irrespective of the reality. To draw an analogy, in case of an accident concerning two vehicles in a traffic, one may consider the bigger vehicle blameworthy for simply being bigger, instead of looking into specifics of the situation and being incongruent with traffic rules. This would be the equivalent of looking through the lens of majoritarianism. While some people take the above approach in the case of an accident to locate a perpetrator and a victim, the sober view is to look into other environmental factors to understand the cause of this conflict. That cause may be the lack of adherence to traffic rules, or aggressive driving, or lack of defensive driving. That sober view may also imply that the smaller vehicle is guilty of having broken the traffic rule. This book scientifically, like something that Elon Musk said a few days back in his panel discussion in front of a live audience with Ben Shapiro. Elon Musk was saying that we have to get rid of this idea that just because someone is in a disadvantaged position automatically means he is right. We have to let go of that view. This book scientifically and engagingly demonstrates that in the social context, that sober view is not to discuss the population proportion but the presence of something called linear theory of social evolution in a community, which may determine the extent of social intolerance from the community. Listen to this. A majority without linear theory of social evolution may not be intolerant. A minority with linear theory of social evolution will be intolerant. Power of the myth. In the United States, a policeman strangled and thereby killed George Floyd, an African-American man who had served 8 prison sentences on various charges like drug possession, theft, and trespass in 2020. While this tragic incident has happened by the aggressive, callous behavior of the policeman, many scientific rigorous analysis suggest that blacks are not targeted disproportionately more in cases of death of unarmed American civilian by police. Unsurprisingly, a white American, namely Tony Timpa, was killed in 2016 by a police officer similarly, who went scot-free too. We can observe the power of the majoritarian myth when we consider the huge agitation that swept the United States in 2020 after the death of George Floyd. The majoritarian myth makes people believe in perpetual white oppression of the blacks, which has led to the Black Lives Matter movement based on the George Floyd incident. In India, the media strongly falls under this majoritarian myth, which is why they choose to portray the death of Hafiz Junaid, a Muslim youth who was killed as a consequence of a fight between two groups over seats in a crowded train in Haryana, as a religious persecution-based murder for his being from a minority community only. On the other hand, Umesh Kolhe's murder, which happened for his support to Nupur Sharma, accused of blasphemy by Muslims, has not been labelled as having a religious motive, despite there being reasonable evidence to that effect. The above story is representative of the rule in the media. The media personnel consider that it is their duty to assist society by either underreporting the crimes perpetrated against the majority community by the minority community, or by overhyping the crimes perpetrated by the majority community against the minority community. They do so by being under the majoritarian myth that anyway the minority is oppressed by the majority and their job requires them to assist the oppressed minority community bear the burden. In a survey into global media reports for 3 years, 2020 to 2022, we can find 8,806 articles mentioning the word majoritarian or majoritarianism. On examination, if we could identify the identity of the majority from the context of the article, it comes as a thorough surprise to discover that in more than 80% of the cases, the Hindus of India internationally are the so-called guilty majority. Given the population of India being less than 18% of the world population, it takes an amazing amount of audacity to blame Hindu majoritarianism so disproportionately. Let us investigate the Indian constitution for any evidence of majoritarianism. The framing of the constitution is, on the contrary, biased against most Indian religious traditions. Evangelization was not seen as an option, whereas the constitution has granted the right to propagate as a fundamental right to religion. The Indian constitution practically offers less rights to the majority Hindus compared to the other religious minorities by not letting them run the effect of Article 28 and Article 30 combined, by not letting them run any educational institution to teach their religious tradition. Majoritarianism is considered a serious issue by the Indian Supreme Court judges too, who often refuse to impose on the religious practices of the religious minorities, deeming them essential to their religion. The same Supreme Court judges impose different constraints on Hindu rituals on different legal arguments, Sabrimala, Jallikattu, Kambala, and Diwali being some of the examples. The minority religions run their religious institutions, but the Hindu temples are predominantly run by the government. Even though majoritarianism is a Western concept, in our study of the constitution and practice, we have found that Western nations such as the UK, the US, France, Germany, and Belgium do not discriminate against the majority, unlike the case in India. The ideas of secularism are a powerful theme in Indian politics, deriving from the legacy of Nehru, who categorically said that the creation of a feeling of security among the minority was the duty of the majority. This kind of blanket morality does not go well with a proper scientific framework of understanding society, as we shall see soon. Article 27 of the Indian Constitution says that no tax revenue may be paid for the maintenance of a particular religion by the government. Many may consider it as an article toward the equal treatment of all religions. In practice, minority children are given special scholarships of significant amount against no such special allotment for the majority. The 93rd Amendment of the Indian Constitution has given tremendous powers to the Indian state that can make even unaided private institutions implement the government agenda of social justice. Samajik Nyay. Again, the minority educational institutions, ironically the best ones in India, are exempted from it. The best minority institutions are exempt from the quota feeling of social justice because first of all they have their own quota, which is they will take some children from their own religion. The communal violence bill is considered a dropped secular agenda, but we could see its enactment in the event of a future rise of the majoritarian myth in politics. The basic premise, so it could come back. The basic premise of this bill is that only the Hindus among the religious communities, and actually upper castes, among the religious communities could form a group to target a minority, but not vice versa. Indian politics, one could argue, has a strong affinity to having special emphasis on the minorities. For example, the immediately preceding Indian ex-Prime Minister declared that the minorities had the first right to national resources. The puzzle emerges. Why is the global media so sharp on the majoritarianism of the Hindus when the Hindus effectively enjoy less rights by the Indian constitution, judiciary and politics compared to the minorities? Let us explore why. Origin of the myth of this majoritarianism idea, okay? Alexis de Tocqueville, I think I'm pronouncing it wrong. Alexis de Tocqueville, a French diplomat, introduced the idea of the tyranny of the majority after a tour of the young American Republic. So when America was first born, basically first gained its independence, his complaint was that the American Republic was managed by the supremacy of popular voting without any other mediating factors. He particularly complained that both the houses in the US were elected by the same mechanism of popular vote only. Remarkably, at that time, the upper house in his own country, France, or in the UK, used to be comprised of selected members of the nobility. एलेक्सी डी टॉकविल जाके यूएसए को क्रिटिसाइज कर रहा है, उसके खुद के देश में नोबल्स के लिए रिजर्वेशन है, वो हाउस ऑफ लॉर्ड्स जैसा. The majority that Tocqueville mentioned may not necessarily be dictated by any identity, but consists of people of baser instinct or of plebeian taste for having come from the lower socio-economic strata. As a solution to the problem of the majority being inexperienced in governance and therefore misdirected, the Europeans had a way of linking experienced people to the process of decision making. So, like technocrats. But not hired like technocrats in India are hired. This understanding was essentially missing in the US. John Stuart Mill had also argued similarly. He had concluded that since the society may go against the tiniest minority, the individual, the majority, may not be given a free hand. Mill, however, had not considered the induction of any experience-based thinking, but developed his social theory as a solution. The whole idea changed dramatically after the incursion of Marxism, a theory on universal history prescribed by Karl Marx, into academia. Originally, Marxism was focused on a different economic system that aimed to create a different social structure and thereby paved the way for a much better living environment for most of the people. To be sort of fair to Marx, he did not even see free market like it is today, or whatever little bit of free market we have today. He saw only feudalism and was giving solutions for that. Today's feudalism is academia. However, the Soviet experience under Stalin was worse than forgettable for a Marxist. The chronic famines and the labor camps did justice neither to the efficiency of the new economic system nor to securing social justice. As information about the happenings in the Soviet lands passed into the other parts of Europe, slowly yet surely, European communists turned to a different avenue altogether. This different avenue was started by Antonio Gramsci, an Italian communist leader who spent a large part of his life in jail and argued about the inefficiency of an alternative economic system without a change in culture. Culture नहीं change होगा तो economic system change करके कोई फायदा नहीं है. He has discussed how to bring in the ways of unearthing new culture into society. This new culture must contradict the traditional understandings for no other reason except for being just traditional. Traditional काहे है? वही criticism है. A group of academicians collectively called the Frankfurt School developed Gramsci's idea and ended up making a deceptive sounding liberalism as we know it today. While the name originates from liberal, a synonym of broad-mindedness, and at the time, liberalism does not accept anything apart from its own theories. Liberalism seeks the capturing of public discourse through control of the academia, media, and popular culture, which explains why these sectors have become the prime target of liberal or left politics. Gramsci's use of culture as the dominant pillar of society has led to an understanding of class conflict, a Marxian jargon of one economic class fighting another one, through cultural terms. The majority oppresses the minority in this class struggle, and that occupies the centrality of understanding while discussing majoritarianism. Moreover, the responsibility for correcting the mistakes of the guilty majority is entrusted with a theory again. एक और फिर से भरोसा theory. एक theory solve करेगा and theory डंडे मारेगा किसको? जो majority की allegedly is guilty of all crimes. Instead of experienced people being chosen to decision making in greater proportions. The idea of majoritarianism has got a new life since then. In India, the matter is a bit complex. The special constitutional rights of the minorities may have come from a colonial legacy from the departing British administration and the path of least resistance undertaken by the initial Indian administration of independent India. The Nehruvian tradition, focusing on an import of understandings of socialism over time, has eventually created a constituency of Indian elites sincerely believing in the majoritarian myth. Now, the main topic of the book. The role of linear, this is all in the introduction chapter, okay? The role of linear theory of social evolution in social intolerance. Okay, ये देखो ये क्या interesting एक theory है. The concept of majoritarianism has originated on account of an assumed symmetry के सब religion और culture equal है. An assumed symmetry among different cultures and communities, which is historically very inaccurate. Some cultures were more intolerant than others in a historic setting. This assumed symmetry has also given birth to the idea of virtuous victimhood. A community can cry out loudly with allegations of intolerance, and that will be believed completely. This attitude of belief in allegations is unsuitable with the framework of economic externality given by Ronald Coase, the preeminent economic thinker. Our Coasean argument is that if a community has incentive to perpetrate intolerance onto another, the other community too has the incentive to level baseless accusations of intolerance against the former community. As tolerance, okay, so Coase is saying that if at all you are in a situation where you can point out to in fact some incentives for one community to perpetrate violence, perpetrate intolerance onto another community, then by extension, it will be seen that opposite community also has incentive to level baseless accusations because maybe they sound believable. Okay. As tolerance is considered necessary in the general modern social understanding, such accusations put the former community on the back foot. In fact, it is plausible that a community that tends to adjust with another community is less likely to complain of intolerance for having the experience of adjustment, whereas the community without much of experience of adjustment can always attribute any minor adjustment to other people's intolerance. Okay, interesting line. Compare this with today's scenario in India, okay. He's saying, it is plausible that a community that tends to adjust with another community is less likely to complain of intolerance because of having the experience of adjustment, whereas the community without much of experience of adjustment will always attribute any minor adjustment to other people's intolerance. There's a famous quote by my favorite economist, Dr. Thomas Sowell. He says, when you are so used to preferential treatment, equality sounds like an oppression. Or equality sounds like injustice. Equal treatment sounds like injustice. Now, if we deny majoritarianism, do we deny existence of social intolerance altogether? Not the least. Let us explore what the common elements in different demonstrated examples of extreme social intolerance are. We can begin with the story of the European colonization of the Americas and the extreme intolerance of Westerners towards indigenous Americans. The conquering Europeans believed that it was their moral duty to convert the manifest destiny. Moral duty to convert the indigenous Americans to Christianity. They also thought that the heathen indigenous Americans did not deserve any better treatment as they were not Christians. Let us look into the great intolerance of the communists towards those whom they considered enemies of the proletariat class. Again, The communists thought that they should work towards the progress of human civilization by making everyone a communist. If someone did not believe in communism, he was on the wrong side of history and deserved to be treated harshly for that very reason. If we investigate the Nazi psyche for intolerance towards the Jews and other dissenting people, it will emerge that the Nazis thought that they were implementing the will of nature by allocating to the Aryan race its rightful place. They also believed that those who disputed the Nazi ideology were obstacles towards the implementation of the will of nature and must be eliminated. What is common among all these three scenarios of extreme social intolerance? It is a concept called linear theory of social evolution, LTSE. The first characteristic of an LTSE, of a linear theory of social evolution, a linear social plan, is that the plan can never be changed based on empirical evidence. People are supposed to forever carry out the plan without any change. The second characteristic, which is the reason for political survival of the plan, is that the believers in the linear theory of social evolution of that group are required to discriminate against people on account of their disbelief in the plan. This formulation of linear theory of social evolution is quite similar to the concept of imperialism developed by Yoram Hazony, the noted Israeli philosopher. In the olden times, during the times of general belief in God, a linear theory of social evolution used to be revealed by God through an appropriate messenger. In the modern godless times, a linear theory of social evolution can very well be a secular ideology like Nazism or communism. Arguably, there is nothing revolutionary in this revelation, since Yuval Noah Harari too has called secular ideologies like Nazism, communism, or liberalism as the new religions. Our hypothesis is that the social intolerance happening because of linear theory of social evolution is wrongly blamed on the majority and called majoritarianism. Political Christianity is the oldest linear theory of social evolution. It is a linear plan to make everybody Christian progressively, without any change on account of any contradictory evidence, like a Hindu Mahatma Gandhi being considered the greatest embodiment of Christian virtues by Christians. Political Christianity did discriminate between the Christians and non-Christians regarding ownership of the land, with the non-Christians being given no legal right to their land. This second characteristic of linear theory of social evolution creates a moral impetus, a moral duty in the believer's mind to discriminate against a non-believer. This is exactly the source of intolerance and otherization created by that linear theory of social evolution of Christianity. Political Christianity was very powerful during the time of European colonization. Then racism, another linear theory of social evolution in which the whites are supposed to grow to capture the world, engendered from the same culture. Political Islam is another linear theory of social evolution of this kind. It is important to emphasize here the distinction between a linear theory of social evolution coming out of a religion, more specifically Christianity or Islam, and the actual practitioners of that religion who often go by their own experiences and understandings rather than the so-called, the claimed linear theory of social evolution of that religion, okay? So he's saying that some people do not even obey those commandments. These practitioners are not part of the linear theory of social evolution unless the two characteristics of the linear theory of social evolution are guiding lights for their lives. In different surveys, it has come out that most Christians in the US do not believe in the exclusivity of their religion, making it clear that the linear theory of social evolution of political Christianity is almost defunct in the West. Liberalism is the most powerful linear theory of social evolution of the present times, whose adherents do believe in a linear plan of everybody becoming liberals, with them being the early converts. Liberalism does not believe in objective reality, making empirical feedback completely irrelevant to the plan. They too do not believe in same rights like freedom of expression for the disbelievers in the dogma of liberalism. They enforce this through a low-scale violence of cancel culture and control of academia. Marxism or Nazism is, again, a linear theory of social evolution started as a secular dogma with the same two characteristics of linear theory of social evolution. Nationalism can be used to further an LTSE, even though it need not be that case. The present European nationalisms, such as that of the US, UK, Italy, Germany, France, and Israel, do not appear to be LTSE, as they take the feedback of reality to change their understanding. of a Nazi ideology, definitely, which is definitely LTSE, is quoted as a symbolic idea of majoritarianism cum perilous nationalism. Nationalism word क्यों खराब है? क्योंकि नाजी लोग nationalist थे. Nazism was a weird mixture of socialism, nationalism, and racism, and its particularly heinous atrocities happened because of racism, not because of nationalism. What about Hinduism? It is a construct of the 19th century by Western observers. Like all nature-worshipping traditions, it is as far as possible from being LTSE. From Hinduism is as far as away from being a linear theory of social evolution because of the belief in the cyclical nature of things and the karma theory, judging everyone by their action, not belief. Hindutva is a potential hot button. Many academicians compare it to Nazism, which is a linear theory of social evolution. We have argued that being believers in liberalism, academicians could be biased against the so-called majoritarian idea of Hindutva. The factual allegations against Hindutva comprise of removing special status for the Muslim majority region of Kashmir, or going for a uniform civil code, or even a special channel Citizenship Amendment Act to citizenship for religiously persecuted minorities from the Islamic countries that were a part of British India. None of these allegations is good enough to demonstrate any characteristic of a linear theory of social evolution. Many liberal academicians predicted doom if these agendas are implemented. However, nothing has come to pass till date, even after the implementation of some of these, which does not speak too highly of the existing academic theories. On the other hand, minorities have received a greater share in scholarships and job offers in bureaucracy after the ascent of the Hindu nationalist BJP. The incidents of riots have fallen too. All these would have been impossible if Hindutva had a linear theory of social evolution. Karl Popper, a distinguished philosopher of science of the 20th century, has implicitly agreed to the idea that a tolerant person and an intolerant one may look the same when you observe them, because tolerance of the intolerant may lead to the ruin of tolerance. Obviously, if the linear theory of social evolution, if the LTSEs are tolerated, then it will lead to societal collapse. Therefore, the source of social intolerance could be an LTSE or resistance to LTSE. We need a scientific test to unearth the reality. Okay, so he's being fair with his own theory here that social intolerance might be caused because of an LTSE, or social intolerance might end up happening because you are trying to resist LTSE. But let's see which side is heavier in such a situation. Okay, which fares how much. Okay, in terms of which might lead to social intolerance more. We are still in the introduction. I'm not going to read anything beyond the introduction. This new subchapter in the introduction section is called the scientific examination of evidence, the two hypotheses. Karl Popper's falsifiability, that a scientific theory must go through a test that could prove it false, is useful for us to appropriately form two hypotheses and test them regarding the source of social intolerance. The majoritarian hypothesis considers the majority as guilty irrespective of having an LTSE. The LTSE hypothesis says that social intolerance depends upon the prevalence of LTSE in the population. If a majority community without LTSE is proven to be the source of social intolerance, then the majoritarian hypothesis may be vindicated. If a minority community with LTSE is identified as the source of a social intolerance, then the LTSE hypothesis may be justified. Since we leave both the possibilities open to empirical verification, our formulation of the problem is falsifiable, which is a pre-requirement for any scientific inquiry. Genocides may be considered examples of socially most intolerant situations. An analysis of 10 commonly considered notorious genocides by the Western society reveals that, listen to this, this is very interesting. An analysis of 10 commonly considered notorious genocides, which are considered notorious by the Western society, reveals that except for the Rwandan genocide of 1994, the majority was not actively involved in any of the other genocides. Whether it's all British atrocities, Aurangzeb, they were never the majority who were doing this. Majority has nothing to do. Being a majority has nothing to do with immediately being a source of a possible genocide someday. In theory, everything is possible, but there's no evidence to suggest that it usually happens. That is all I'm saying.
Because everything can't be based on Nazism. Everything. The world can't revolve around just Hitler's actions, one person's actions. Okay, now the Rwandan genocide of 1994 is interesting. There, two tribes were in conflict, Tutsi and Hutu. I don't know who did the genocide, but basically about 10 million people were killed of one tribe in a matter of like 5-6 days. And there is a criticism of Bill Clinton that's the one time US government decided that we are not going to meddle in other people's affairs, and that genocide happened. So later on, whenever anyone talks of not being the global police, the pro global policing or the weapons manufacturing industry, the military industrial complex, they say that do you want another Rwanda-like situation where Bill Clinton did not intervene and as a result 10 million people got killed. However, to our knowledge, an LTSE was found to be present in each of these 10 genocides. Okay, so all these 9 out of these LTSE was found in 10 of these genocides, but 9 out of those 10, in 9 out of 10 of those genocides, the majority was not to be blamed. So 9 genocides here were committed by the minority because of having an LTSE on a majority who did not have an LTSE. For the evidence does not look rosy for the majoritarian hypothesis. For less extreme situations than genocide, let us formulate a suitable test. Before we decide what is to be studied, we need to know what is not to be studied. Media reports of intolerance are one such false flag. Obviously, media establishments being driven by liberalism focus on the majority as a perpetrator, which would mean no objective reality in the media reports. But there are even more fundamental reasons. Nobody in the modern value system would accept the charge of being a perpetrator of intolerance, even though they are. Okay, remember the Coasian framework, because according to the Coasian framework, a community against which a genocide is possible automatically has an intolerance to make fake allegations of atrocities. It has scientifically been proven that individuals with dark triad traits, meaning Machiavellism, narcissism, and psychopathy, signal virtuous victimhood more than others. Therefore, the perpetrators would concoct fake tales of intolerance to peddle to the world. For example, the Nazis used to embark upon a false flag operation before the actual operation, such as a concocted attack on Germany by Polish soldiers before the Nazi invasion of Poland. A second false flag is the degree of recorded violence. It is possible that a community indulges in intolerance toward another community, but the latter community retaliates and inflicts more violence to the former community, which is often a scientific reality, like Israel. You do wars against them, they will go to your house, kill you, and not give your house back. Because who asked you to do the first attack? Who asked you to draw first blood? Now तुम्हें जगह वापस नहीं मिलेगा भोसड़ी के. Moreover, as our Coasian framework has predicted, virtuous victimhood could be a very useful tool to further one's LTSE. Even in a prestigious American college, students were found to carry out microaggressions to demonstrate virtuous victimhood, thereby boosting their LTSE of liberalism. Therefore, the degree of recorded violence can also misdirect us on the source of violence. Interesting line. The degree of recorded violence can misdirect us on even the source of the violence, because misdiagnosis of the problem. Now that we have discarded other people's knowledge about the source of intolerance, we can only bank upon the knowledge of the perpetrator and the victim regarding the source of intolerance, with both of them having the same exact understanding. This kind of knowledge is similar to the understanding of quote-unquote tacit knowledge elaborated by famous economist Friedrich Hayek. People do not share their tacit knowledge necessarily with others, but act on it in their own interest. The victim understands that the source of violence is elsewhere. She could fight it to an extent, but after a while would rather migrate out of that region to a less troublesome region if that option exists for her. Conversely, the perpetrator will not be prone to migrate out to another region, unlike the victim. Therefore, the rise or fall of the population share of a community in a region is indicative of its being a perpetrator or a victim, respectively. Both the Nazis and the Jews used to accuse the other of perpetrating injustice. But at the end of the day, the proportion of the Jewish population went down, as opposed to the population calling themselves Nazis, which demonstrates the idea of population proportion as a measure of social intolerance. What a great scientific way to solve this problem. जो भाग रहा है वही तो एक्चुअली अत्याचारित है. The Parsi population proportion wise is decreasing in India without any allegation of intolerance from any side. But interestingly, listen to this. Why is the Parsi population decreasing? It could be noted that economic entrepreneurship was stifled by government actions in the pre-economic liberalization era. वो PC Mahalanobis के हसीन सपने, Hindu rate of growth. Pre-economic liberalization era, making the entrepreneurial Parsis suffer from the governmental intolerance against entrepreneurship. We offered here the caveat. Like any test, this need not be a foolproof test to be acceptable. Statistically speaking, no test is a foolproof one. But even in case of a false positive, the fundamental idea of our test remains valid, which is that migration happens because of intolerance. The other objection could be that some communities tend to have lesser fertility and others more, leading to change in population proportion. It is possible that the communities with LTSE use resources to cater to their moral impulse out of their LTSE, whereas the other communities use that resource for their own economic development. Haven't we seen this? Okay, listen to what he's saying. One community that has LTSE uses the resources to cater to their moral impulse which comes out of their LTSE itself, but the community which does not have an LTSE uses resources only for their economic development. You understand what he's hinting at? Therefore, the communities without LTSE could end up having lesser fertility. If both the majority and the minority are having an LTSE, like the case in Sri Lanka, both sides with a version of nationalism that is unconcerned about the other side, then the LTSE hypothesis cannot exactly predict the outcome. A diminishing in either of the community's population proportion is possible on account of the strength of the other's LTSE. जिसका LTSE strong, उसका जीत होगा in that case. The majoritarian hypothesis predicts that the diminishing in the minority population. Okay, the majoritarian hypothesis predicts the diminishing in the minority population share always. We have found no major change in the population share in the cases considered, and no way to favor one hypothesis over another in the cases so far mentioned. In case both the majority and the minority do not have LTSE, the identities of the groups are feeble, and no accurate data is therefore available. In Brazil, the race-based identities like white or black are absent, therefore no data may be available to. Again, it cannot conclusively favor one hypothesis over the other. He's being fair here. In case of the majority having an LTSE and the minority having none, like Bangladesh or Pakistan, both the majoritarian hypothesis and the LTSE hypothesis predict a diminishing in the minority population share. We observe it in countries like Bangladesh or Afghanistan, where the LTSE of political Islam has led to the diminishing of the minority Hindu population, who of course don't have an LTSE. The most remarkable case happens in the case of the majority being without LTSE and the minority having LTSE, like India. The majoritarian hypothesis predicts again a diminishing in the minority population, whereas the LTSE hypothesis predicts a diminishing in the majority population, which is exactly what is happening. Therefore, the LTSE is in fact a more accurate framework to look at Indian population with. Ample evidence demonstrates political Islam, being an LTSE, is active in India, where the Muslims are a minority, population proportion wise. So, as a counter to the idea of majoritarianism, this book says, now which you can use to argue now, we should not even consider majoritarianism as a real thing. The counter argument is whether a community has a linear theory of social evolution or not. And for more nuanced arguments and for understanding the argument very skillfully, you'll have to buy and read the book completely. Ample evidence demonstrates political Islam, being an LTSE, is active in India, where the Muslims are a minority. Population proportion wise, the minority Muslim population has gone up and the majority Hindu population has gone down. The LTSE hypothesis is therefore vindicated over the majoritarian one. This conclusion is not based on the exceptionality of India. We observe very similar stories for Tibet, Nepal, or even Lebanon. Okay, so this is being observed everywhere. Okay, repeatable, duplicatable. We have previously been puzzled to find the blame of being majoritarian being disproportionately hurled at the Hindus. What a great book. Once we accept the linear theory of social evolution hypothesis, the reason is also vindicated. Like our Coasian framework predicted, the lack of having an LTSE may lead to being blamed for intolerance, which happens to the Hindus of India. In fact, most of the groups blamed in the global media survey, such as the Buddhists of South Asia, Western Christians, and the whites of the USA, may not be having any LTSE either. We have not left unaddressed the typical arguments given as examples of majoritarianisms. Muslims are overrepresented in the prison population of India, which is often alluded to connoting some kind of bias against the minority. Remarkably, in the prison population of the UK, a nation where both Muslims and Hindus are minorities, the Muslims are overrepresented and the Hindus are considerably underrepresented. Assumed symmetry of all cultures cannot explain these facts. The other kind of majoritarianism nobody mentions is the majoritarianism in academics, where no less than 90% of the faculty members in fields related to social sciences are liberals. This underrepresentation of one half of the US population is a kind of majoritarianism, based on a label, and is no less dangerous than the other supposed manifestations of majoritarianism discussed. In anonymous surveys, liberals have acknowledged their reluctance to award a faculty position or a grant to a conservative, in spite of having no issue with her academic standards. Liberals definitely not having more scientific aptitude with most of the social sciences goes diagonally against scientific thinking. Lastly, having failed to explain the worldview of half of the population or more, liberals have failed the real mission of the academy on account of their LTSE. The general population is prone to ignore the happenings in the academy with some amount of surreality, considering anything concerning the academy is just another tale of hair-splitting argument. Historically speaking, an LTSE driving the academy can facilitate another darkening age, with the complete destruction of humanity's scientific thinking. So he's saying that what liberals are doing to the academia, that might have dire consequences for entire humanity, because the institution of academia is being diluted. The gravity of the institutions are being diluted. And LTSE creates a theoretical identity like race, religion, or nationality, whereas a person usually has experiential identities like family, extended community, or tradition. The theoretical identities create an impulse to grow on account of often involved linear theories associated with them. But the experiential identities do not have that tendency at all. If a society has only experiential identities, no identity can become a majority. If a society has only experiential identities, no identity can become a majority. On the other hand, when a society has theoretical identities, particularly with a linear plan, they tend to engulf society, and this is exactly how majoritarianism is created out of a theoretical identity. I think this is a fucking great argument if we are ever advocating for eliminating the concepts of majority minority in the first place, because that's based just on one identity first of all, not anything else like music taste or food choices, but also race and religion are theoretical identities, not experiential real life identities. Culture custom might be let's say an actual identity, or even an experiential identity, but then how many people from every religion are actually followers of the customs of that religion? Okay, it might well end up happening that it is seen that most Christians or most Muslims don't really go to a mosque or church that often, so we would consider that that's not a minority then, or maybe that's not even a religious identity, because whatever is the experiential identity, they are not even following that. They are not a part of that experiential identity. I wonder, what do you all think? Can a theoretical identity like race or religion, or at least in the case of India, a theoretical identity like religion, can it really be separated from experiential identities if experience also includes religious customs, etc.? I don't think it's that strong of an argument. As a last exercise, we have asked ourselves, what if we were wrong in our argument till now? Suppose liberalism and LTSE is the most potent weapon to solve the problem of societal intolerance. If that were so, After decades of dissemination of liberalism in the American universities, social intolerance should have gone down in the United States. A National Bureau of Economic Research paper authored by distinguished American economists reveals that in the last 4 decades, the social intolerance for members of the other party has, on the contrary, gone up tremendously. Liberalism has not helped America. In the last 4 years, too, the proportion of Americans who believe in tolerance of others has gone down from 80% to 58%, unearthing the perilous effects of liberalism in bringing social harmony. The role of Satya and Ahimsa in social harmony. Recognizing that most of the believers in the majoritarian myth or liberalism do not suffer from any dearth of good intention, it is quite important to see what has gone wrong with the social justice agenda. We ask ourselves about the social sciences that guide us to concepts like majoritarianism. The social sciences, ironically because of the nomenclature, are too distant from the scientific facts. From scientific facts. More worrisome is the fact that scholarship has become subject to political ideology now like never before. We can make the case by looking into envy. My favorite argument in this book so far. We can make the case by looking into envy, a psychological element noted in all different cultures throughout the ages. From ancient epics to the high literature of the 19th and 20th centuries. It is one of the 7 sins in the Christian tradition. It is one of the 6 inner enemies of human beings in the Indic traditions, jealousy and envy. The challenge to the extent that himsa means violence in non-Bengali languages, but in Bengali himsa means jealousy. Okay, jealousy and violence are almost interconnected in Indian languages. What a beautiful word, beautiful language we have. The challenge of the previous times was to devise a mechanism of an inner control to curb the menace of envy in man for a stable social system. Karl Marx ignored the idea of envy. Okay, M. Shastri is saying theoretical identities can become experiential ones over time. Lies over time become truth. Just look at caste, not Jati Varna, whose description of hierarchy and atrocities were theoretical. But the theory of atrocity gained its own truth, and now there's a sizable population that believes in the British description of caste, and also people whose castes were invented in like 150 years back, or gained that stature in society just maybe 80 years back, 100 years back, 150 years back, like we learned in the papers of Dipankar Gupta and Hitesh Ranjan Shandal. They all of a sudden become trads and say that no, they are really upper caste because they were born in this family, but their genealogies are fake. They became upper caste like in just 150 years back. Okay. Let's see what can Satya and Ahimsa in the Indian of the Indian traditions can bring as an antidote to this conversation. Karl Marx ignored the idea of envy, and so have the successors of his idea. Instead, envy has been glorified in the name of social justice. But it is a very slippery slope with no end in sight. Envy is ubiquitous. Even among the cultures that do not have an understanding of material wealth, envy is common regarding recognized scholarship, the social status of the spouse, spiritual advancement, amount of mother's attention received compared to the other siblings, so on and so forth. All this can be a cause of envy. Being glorified, envy has gone up, particularly when we observe arousal of envy as a good political tool to win elections in a democracy or form the basis for long-term politics. The social justice-driven social systems do not improve the plight of the people, but impose further authoritarian sanctions on them to quench the thirst for envy among followers. The problem of social disharmony is often a product of glorification of this envy, used to be taken care of in the conservative social system through inner discipline. Liberalism has created a narrative of ignoring the existence of envy as a destructive force and has glorified it as social justice. Pretty harsh. Therefore, it is impossible to effectively create a counter force to subdue envy through inner discipline. Now that we understand the limitation of the present theories of social justice, let us comprehend the purpose of theories in general from a philosophical lens. Man feels a spiritual mission to elevate himself to his own conscience by his actions towards benevolence for others. It is not a rewarding task. Man feels a spiritual mission to elevate himself to his own conscience by his actions towards benevolence for others. It is not a rewarding task, not only in the short run, but also in the long run, understanding the smallness of human existence. An LTSE helps an average man here by invoking the group identity instead of individual actions. The growth of LTSE becomes his mission, which is connected to the essence of human existence for a believer of this LTSE. Now he can feel the achievement of his group members. This may, during initial stages, create some harmony among the LTSE driven group. The unity of the believers of the LTSE could come on account of their efforts towards otherizing the non believers. Problems surface once the LTSE rules a region with no immediate. Okay, listen to this point. Problems come up when the LTSE rules a region with no immediate scope of growing. The unity of the believers of LTSE remains no more, as history bears testimony. Why? No theory attempts to understand the differences and the engagement between one another for social harmony. The affinity through theory is only because of the presence of disbelievers in the theory. The moment the theory becomes socially universal, further theories are chalked out and people start fighting over new theories. This is why an empirically driven social system can achieve social harmony that no theory can ever do sustainably. In the empirical window, the understanding is cultivated by experience and collective understanding at the local and experiential levels, like Tantra maybe. These exercises are based on empirical identity, not the theoretical ones. The Indic worldview is understood to be an empirical one. This worldview, being consistent with scientific understanding and at variance with the present day social sciences, divides the human nature into Daivi, sustainability driven, and Asuric, ego driven. The Daivi nature requires the cultivation of Satya and Ahimsa, the prescription for sustainable social harmony as per the Mahabharata. If we look into the idea of Satya, it neither approves any of the post-truth concepts invoked under liberalism, nor does it offer consent to ignoring the objective reality like liberalism does. The idea of ahimsa is grossly violated in liberalism through invocation of victimhood, which is himsa to others. Ahimsa does not also allow discriminatory treatment towards violence when perpetrated by different groups. Like all LTSEs, liberalism may also die out, but the world should not simply replace it with a new social theory. The journey through Satya and Ahimsa is real, experiential, and sustainable for social harmony. May the world be wise enough to choose that journey. Let us endeavor the voyage together to understand the majoritarian myth, for which we have browsed through a map in this chapter. The purpose of this book is not to preach an ideology, but to help mankind unearth the path of sustainable social harmony. That is the end of this introduction, and then starts the rest of the book. Pretty well written book, pretty cool with different new interpretations, frameworks, theories, fresh new ideas, original ideas. Okay then, thank you for joining the live stream, guys. This was a good one. Good night, guys. See you soon.